Welcome to this podcast conversation with Kelly Schulte. And we're going to bring this story to you because when I had my son diagnosed, everyone told me there's nothing you can do. And I know how desperately I looked for moms with a different story. So I am collecting transformation stories from all over the world, my own personal ones from the course participants and my own transformation story, but also moms who's done the same things simultaneously. So I want a broad spectrum of recovery stories because I think they are so important in this time where there's not a lot of stories out there that give you hope. And so, Kelly, I was extremely excited to find you and realize that our oldest children are the same age. And you did exactly the same simultaneously, just in another country, in the US, while I was turning my son's autism around in Scandinavia. So why don't you take me back to where that all began and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and your background.
All right. Well, my name is Kelly Schulte, and I am from Minnesota in the USA. I have 5 children. I really had to chuckle in one of your courses where you said, instead of dealing with things, you just get a puppy or you have more children. I'm like, that must have been me, because I literally look back at what we were going through with my oldest daughter, and it was so out of control. She was, throwing things and hitting things and destroying things and punching walls, and it was just so tumultuous, and we just kept having children. And I'm like, how? Like, why were we doing that? But I mean, I would never change it at all. I love all 5 of my children. But you look back in those times and you're like, what in the world was I thinking? Because Hannah was born totally neurotypical, extremely alert. It was at about her 10-month checkup. They gave her a vaccine, and I would say what started was respiratory issues. All of a sudden, we were doing nebs every 2 hours around the clock, and it was intense. And from there, she actually ended up doing her full round for 5 years of vaccines, because I had no idea the correlation. But when I looked back and started digging in, it was at her 18-month vaccination was the one where literally she just was gone. And I remember thinking, like, when she would go into these, like, we called them meltdowns, when she would go into that place, she was gone. It was like she was so vacant. And I was like, is she like possessed? Like, is she, because she was gone. And she would be that way until her entire nervous system would collapse, and she'd be a puddle on the floor, and then so much remorse. I'm sorry, mommy, I'm sorry, because she would have destroyed everything.
So she was conscious that she was out of herself and that there was consequences, because many children don't have that ability when they are in those initial phases.
Yeah, and she would always have this, like, it would be like a collapse and then like a remorse that would come. And she always called it the feeling. Like, the feeling took over, like throughout all of her years. Even as an adult, she will say, like, where she can feel that. And then she has strategies in which she, will push that aside or deals with it. It doesn't anymore consume her.
When was this? So what year did this happen, Kelly?
Well, she started articulating that, I'd say, at about 5. When she was younger than that, she never could articulate it. We were always in this quandary of, is it in her power or not? Is she misbehaving or not? Is she, she was the picky eater. She was a tiptoe walker. She couldn't handle tags. It was just like, life was just so much for her. And at that point I was working still. So I was a teacher. I have a master's degree in education. So I'm an elementary school teacher. I work with my key focus has been primary. So kindergarten, first grade, the little ones, teaching them all that beginning stuff is like my passion. So when she got to first grade, I was like, okay, this is not normal anymore. Like, before I was like, she's just maybe, like, she never crawled, not one. She stood up and walked. at 10 months, just stood up and walked. She was done. And I'm going, oh, what a gifted kid. She's so, and then she also super articulate, like fluent language at like 12 months. Like she was just fluent. And then she also like potty trained. She was at daycare. And I just did an in-home daycare. Actually, the woman who worked in my classroom was pregnant at the same time I was. I'm like, why don't you stay home with our babies? And she's like, okay. So I had a really sweet place for her to go. But at 18 months, she came home. She's like, I'm not wearing panties anymore. I'm done. And that's how she potty trained. Like, so I, this whole time was like, she's so gifted and so smart, which she was, but then she had all of these things that were so off. And our pediatrician just told me I wasn't disciplining well enough and like all of these things. I'm like, dude, you don't know. Like I've worked in inner city. I have worked with really hard kids. Like my toolbox of discipline strategies is unlimited, and I just couldn't get through to her. And then I had this one doctor, actually I was really frazzled because she was so out of control. She would go after my other kids, and I was like, I didn't know what to do. And I went to this mom's group I was at church. And the woman there was like, if any of you needs prayer, just come back, and I went back there and I just burst into tears and I was bawling. And I'm like, my kid is out of control. At this point, she's in kindergarten and I don't know what to do. And she's blowing these fits and she won't listen and she does dangerous things. And like all the doctors think I'm crazy. The school that I taught at for 10 years told me I was the crazy one, that I was giving her anxiety. I was making her this way because she could pull it all together and be the perfect student, even though she couldn't socialize with anyone. And all the testing we would do for autism, they'd be like, oh no, she's not. I'm like, she can tell you what to do in a social situation. She just can't do it. She's super smart. She's telling you what she should be doing, but she doesn't do it. She knows what she should do to calm herself. She just doesn't do it. We were seeing 7 different doctors at this point, and this sweet woman, she's like, well, let's pray. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, this is beyond prayer. Like, this is beyond, like, God can't help this. Like, this is so beyond. And she's like, okay, let's pray. I'm like, okay, fine. Like, and she prayed. And after she prayed, she's like, have you ever tried natural health? And I'm like, no, they're like witch doctors. That's like voodoo. My dad has told me, you don't go to chiropractors, you don't, And so I just had that mindset. And, she's like, well, why don't you come to my doctor and I'll take you. And she literally took me by the hand because 20 years earlier, she had a child, So, I mean, when we're talking, this is 40 years ago, she had a child with autism and she turned her daughter's autism around as well. So she literally took me by the hand, went with me to the chiropractor with my daughter, and just like held my hand through it all. And literally they did kinesiology and started adjusting her. She couldn't eat anything. Like her body was reactive to all foods. So literally they said, start with gluten, dairy, corn syrup. Okay. So I went home and my whole cupboard, everything.
That out. And this is 2000 and when?
This would have been 98, 2004.
Yeah. So
I go through my cupboard and like everything had one of those ingredients in. Every single thing, other than our fruit and vegetables and stuff, which she was good eating those things. And I was like, oh my gosh, so overwhelmed. And then I'm like, okay, I just took all of it and put it in bags and brought it to my daycare lady's house. I'm like, here, have some food. Like, I can't throw it away, but here, you take it. And I went to the store. I'd never been in a co-op my whole life, like a natural food store, never. I walked in and literally halfway through the store, I'm like, I have $500 worth of groceries. I don't know how to prepare any of it. I don't know if it tastes good. I don't even know what to do. And I just start crying in the middle of the store and I leave the cart and run out. Like I was just so overwhelmed. So again, Robin, the one from church, came and held my hand, took me through the store. Like, here, this is the good alternative sour cream. Here are, and I mean, when we're talking gluten-free 20 years ago,
not a lot there.
Awful. So basically, but then I didn't even know, like, I didn't know what an artichoke was. Like I had no idea.
No.
All these things. So she literally helped me. I got the Nourishing Traditions cookbook that taught me how to cook food. Cause in Minnesota it's casseroles and you think that's healthy. It's not. And so we started on that journey, and literally for her and for us, I just started praying every day for her, and like God would show us the journey and the way to go, and that we wouldn't get to weird natural doctors and all of this stuff. And the kinesiology was the key for her in our journey in that time. And we had a pediatric chiropractor who did kinesiology. She was also spirit filled, which is just a little different. So like a Christian, defined was like we go to church, we were in moms groups and Bible studies and tried to live a good life. But when you're spirit filled, you're actually led by the Spirit, and you can see things in the Spirit. And so she did not tell me, because I wasn't in that place, but she was praying things over Hannah and breaking generational curses over her and things she would see in the Spirit when she was adjusting her and stuff. And then I went through this awakening when we went to Texas spiritually, where the Lord opened my eyes to like, there's way more to me than just going to church and going to Bible studies and whatnot. And then that's when things really exploded. And things like, I just knew what supplements she needed to take. I just knew what she needed in situations. And I mean, she was so sensitive that like, she went to school one day and they were not allowed to feed her anything. It was only what I'd send. They went on a field trip, forgot her snack. They gave her a graham cracker. Oh. She got off the bus, threw herself on the floor outside the bus, like the ground outside the bus, yelling and screaming and kicking. And I had to carry her in the house. And she screamed like that on the floor until this was like, she got off the bus at 3:30 till 5:30 when Paul came home. And like him entering the door and the door slamming, like shocked her out of it. I called the school. We couldn't figure out, nothing had happened. She wouldn't talk. And it ended up being 1 graham cracker. Yeah. And it was that intense. And that's when I started getting this, wow, there's a huge connection with food. And she was so toxic. I mean, just so toxic. So we never actually detoxed her, but her body naturally detoxed as we like gave her different foods. I mean, it was so intense. If I bought non-organic lettuce, she'd have a meltdown. It was so intense. And I'd bring bags of groceries to my chiropractor. She'd muscle test her, and that's what she would eat. And I'd return the other groceries. I got to know the grocery store really well. They were amazing. But we just went through this journey, and literally she was on medication, seeing 7 doctors. From this time when this woman prayed for me at church, we started this natural journey, and we started, the chiropractic and like praying. And then when we went to Texas, I had this awakening. It all happened within like a year. And also, I was in Texas, my friend explained to me the power of our words and how our words create. And she's like, I want you to go to the coffee shop, and I'm going to stay with Hannah, and you write out all the negative things you've ever said about her. You write down all the negative thoughts and feelings you've had about her. You write out everything that doesn't align. Like, she's super smart, but she's showing these things. Write it all out, and then write the opposite of all of those things, and declare it every day. So then we burned the old things, and I had this list, and I would declare every day, Hannah has control of her emotions. She is kind and personable to people, like all of these things. And literally one by one, I just started seeing them happen, And so I would say in a span of like about 2 years total. So we started kind of around 5, or probably around 6 when we actually went to the chiropractor. And then by 7, she was doing so much better. And by 8, she was off of every medication. And this is what I loved about the chiropractor we went to. She's like, I'm not going to tell you to quit medications. I'm not going to tell you to quit seeing doctors. I'm just going to tell you that as her body is healed and as God heals her body, they will tell you to quit coming. And so that's exactly what happened. Within a year, she was off of all meds. Within 2 years, every single doctor, the psychiatrist, psychologist, OT, PT, blah, 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 they all like, she doesn't need us anymore, and like was completely neurotypical by age 8, completely miracle. And it was really interesting because along the way there were, she was a tippy toe walker. She had to do braces on her legs. And the doctor had told us that we were going to have to get Botox injections to stretch her muscles because they weren't stretching and all of this stuff. And I was now to the point of I started researching. Like I even researched every supplement and every ingredient and every supplement before I give it to her, you know? And so I started researching Botox, and I'm like, they're going to inject my child with botulism. You know what I mean? And so I literally, you know, I knew Hannah had spiritual giftings in all of this. Like, and so this was one of the affirmations kind of at the same time I was getting this like, wow, there's more to God than just church and reading my Bible. And the doctor said, you know, next time you come in 7 days, if you don't keep these braces on, and she had braces from her hip bones to her ankles, and then she was in casts her whole foot up to that brace. So she'd be braced and have to sleep like that. So we gave her ibuprofen and Tylenol together to just, they have to stay on. They have to stay on. And she yelled and she screamed and she blew a fit. I finally had my husband go in with her because I'm like, I can't listen to this anymore. And I'm on my bed and I'm like, Jesus, if you're going to heal her, you're going to heal her. We're done. We're just done with this. And I went in and I took off the braces. I'm like, go to sleep. My husband came in. I'm like, I just said, if God's going to heal her, he's going to heal her. We don't need these stupid braces. So then the next day we're going to the doctor, like the next week. And I am in sheer panic because I'm like, now I have to stand up to this doctor. And at that point, I wasn't super secure with standing up to doctors yet and say, we're not doing this. And he's going to tell me how terrible I am. Or I just let them do this. Like, and the whole time to the doctor's office, I'm just like, you know, and, you know, you think of the thing you said, like I threatened her, like, they're going to stick this huge needle in you if you don't keep these on. And, oh, you just go, oh my gosh. We get to the doctor's office. He takes all the casting off and measures her legs, her ankles. And he's like, oh my gosh, you've gone from a -2 to a +22 in your range of motion. He's like, I've never had that happen. You must have totally done what I told you to do and whatever. And Hannah looks at him. She goes, no, on the way here, I just told Jesus, like, I really don't want that shot. Can you just do what you need to do so I don't need that shot? And she's like, so he just did it. Like, and to her, it was so like, no big deal. And the doctor looked at me and he's like, so you did the braces? I'm like, no, we didn't do. And he had no idea what to say. Mm-hmm. But the shot became null and void. I didn't have to deal with that. I didn't have to tell him. And he was like, well, that couldn't have happened. You know, and he just was in, and I'm like, well, obviously God just healed her because we did not do, you know, and so that whole piece just started to escalate. You know, and just having that, it's that intuition of knowing as a mother. I feel like that's like God reopened that up for me so that I knew what she needed, you know. Mm-hmm. So, and then from there on, she just was totally healed. And every tendon, every ligament, all her physical, she had one eye that was cross-eyed and is totally normal now, like all of these things. And now she's 22. She's thriving. She's a senior at an art college in Minneapolis. She has an international internship right now where she's getting all of these things are going on their social media for advertising. And so it's so fun to see where doctors told me there's nothing you can do. You're there, you know, she's going to be like this forever. You're just going to have to accept it. And I'm like, no, this is not. And I knew in my heart of hearts, this is not the plan God has for my child. I know it's not. And so he's going to have to show me what it is, you know? And it was interesting because I did find this amazing pediatrician along the way. And when I went to her, I just kind of said, like, God sent me here for you to heal my daughter. And she's like, okay. Like, she was like, okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. But when Hannah was healed, I kept bringing her to the doctor because I felt like I needed to testify of the healing happening without her help. Like, you know what I mean? And so when Hannah was fully healed, she's like, Kelli, I don't know what you did, but I know what you did works. And we know what we do doesn't work. And we know it's a Band-Aid, but we don't know what else to do. So she's like, can we meet? So we met, we had coffee for 4 hours. And I just shared with her what we did, you know, the chiropractic, the spinal alignment, the food, and the power of food. Because really with Hannah, it was the power of food that healed her and the declaration of the word. I'm positive those are the two keys for her. Yes. And it was just amazing. And we got done with a 4-hour coffee and she was like, I learned more from you in 4 hours than I have learned in my 20-year medical career, all of my schooling, all she's ever had was a 2-hour nutrition course.
Wow.
In all of her training. And she's like, Kelli, this is it. So she's one of the people who like, she'll refer people to me because she's like, we just know we don't know what to do, you know?
So that's actually, so for you now, you're one of the older moms like me, like the grandmom generation now. And we're like the elders of the tribe. So we started this, these many years ago, decades ago. And we both have adult children that are now thriving. So from this historical perspective, when we look back at what are young moms being told right now, like we did, and what has actually happened since, from your perspective, when it comes to the traditional way of diagnosing and dealing with it afterwards? Because in my experience here in Europe, not much has actually changed, which I find a bit frightening. So there's almost like, it's almost gotten worse, meaning moms do not hear the stories that we heard, because I know there was a movement back in the US. I went to the US to learn this from holistic doctors, from other moms. And there were all these success stories that I had never heard of. And I had to hear them in order to take those decisions to change everything, the diet, moving, getting rid of toxins. But it's almost like these success stories are so rare right now. The doomsday predictions from the experts are the same. And moms are left with, we need to accept this, and we need to be proud of this, and we need to find the gifts in this. And if you are a warrior mom, there's a whole new generation of young children on the spectrum and their moms who are actually attacking you, telling you that you are an ableist, like a racist almost, that you are delusional and that you are evil for wanting to change the symptoms. So that was a lot of questions in one, but with all these words, what comes up for you when you hear this and when you think back and look at the situation for young moms now?
Yeah, it's so interesting because right now we just started a journey with my son who's 16, right? And I have that same thing of like, the warrior mom rises up in me. Like, you gave me a diagnosis, and I see the diagnosis as a key to the symptoms that need to be reversed. It's all it is. It's a key. And it's so sad when we think like the medical world has not progressed in any way, and these moms are told, and it breaks my heart when a mom will just surrender to, this is the way my child is, and to open their eyes. I always pray for opportunities. When I see moms, because I do a lot of teaching here in the US, classes, and what actually changes their heart are these stories. Because the power of the testimony, again, we're creating with our words. When they hear the testimony, it ignites like there's a possibility I've never heard from my child, And so one of the things I think that's super powerful is I feel like that whole narrative of that group of moms who wants to stay there, who wants to be the victim, who wants to get, maybe like even I think we were there. Like, you almost get an identity from your child, and having to go to the doctor and having to do these things, and you're so busy and you're being that great mom because you're going to the doctor and you're doing these things, where really it's a victim mentality. And if you think of our world at large right now, the whole world who is not awake right now is under that. So these moms are under that, and it needs to be broken off of them. They're blinded, they cannot see, you cannot talk to them. But when the Spirit of the Lord enters into that thing, there's something that will ignite. And it's the testimony that goes out, because it even says in the Bible, the testimony is what brings that change. What I've done for you, I'll do for others. So whenever I speak, and I speak of my children and any of their stories, because I have 5, 3 have significant health challenges, stories. And when I share those stories and they go out, it doesn't even matter what the audience tends to be in front of me. And I'm only saying this from like I've only done in-person things. I've never done anything like online. I'm doing my first one next week. We'll see how that goes, where there's an opportunity for people to comment. I feel like that freedom to just slam somebody because I can type it in. There's no accountability face to face. I have been like, when people, they come to me after and they're just like, I didn't know. I didn't know there was something. I didn't know there could be roots that need to, you know, it could be mold. It could be, there's so many things, every single child's so different. And I think, like the other day you did a call with some of us who did a nutrition class, and like, to me, the conviction fell on me is we have got to get this word out. We have got to, and we have to pray over our words before they go out, for the Lord to send the angels over these hearts of these mamas who are, you know, they're scared, they're fearful. They don't know what to do because there's no one out there telling them there's something else that can be done. And then they shut down to it because they're so ingrained in that thinking. It's kind of like trying to, in the US, you know, talk about things that are not great right now in the US. I won't even say a name, it'll probably be, you know, but like, you just bring up this person's name in our country and like, and you're like, oh my gosh, but it's just like, the Lord's going to have to shift and move that, you know, and our responsibility, I think, is just getting the word out, praying for the word to go out and for the angels to carry it, for the ears to be open, the eyes to see and ears to hear what is coming, and that it would ignite their hearts and open their hearts, because they're hurting, they're scared, they don't know what to do, they accept it, and this is my life. And now I become
beyond, underneath the anger, there is a grief, because I remember my first reaction was grief. When I heard about this, I went to a conference with about 300 other moms, and I heard these doctors, they were all, by the way, medical neurologists, immunologists that had a child on the spectrum that could not be helped in the traditional system. So they had shifted towards understanding and reversing. So when I heard about this, it was a remembrance. It was an acknowledgement of something that I knew from divine guidance. And then there was this grief that it was almost like being confronted with what I lost. So my faith, my belief, values, nature, real food, real mothering, and this being in this hypnotic state where we just follow false prophets and leaders like doctors, like professors, like autism societies. And we got to look at what's the energy in all these entities and organizations. I think victim is one thing, but it's also that we have all forgotten. So the energy in those organizations and in this way of parenting is fear-based, it's attack, so it's almost reptilian, fight, flight, attack, nastiness, darkness, arrogance, power hungry, abuse of power, all these things that are not good values. It's not being a righteous person. I'm just sorry I have to say that, but I see it even in the Christian community with autism mamas being in that I'm giving up phase. Okay, this is what you've given me. This is my lot. Nothing I can do about it. And that's not what faith is about, because it's about miracles.
And if you brought your child to Jesus and said, dude, he'd be like, that's not my plan for your kid. Call in the plan for your kid. That is what he would say. He would not. I'm having this issue right now, even with church, right? So you got to stay 6 feet apart. So don't lay hands on the sick. It says, lay hands on the sick and they will be healed, right? So now God has no power. So we can't lay hands on the sick because, oh my goodness, that virus is going to, we're going to get it and then it's your own fault and you're going to spread it. And I'm like, no deadly poison will touch me. The beginning of this whole thing, I was reading in the Bible, and at the first we didn't know what it was, right? So we were all a little like, this could be intense. But it said, no deadly pestilence will come near your home. And I took that word and I stood on it. I'm like, no deadly pestilence will come near my home, which means me, my family, my extended family. It will not. My daughter has been literally eating food, sharing vegetable dip with 2 people who tested positive the next day.
Wow.
She was negative.
Mm-hmm.
She said 3 close contact, because she has no fear. She's like, and her friends, they're in that age, they don't care. They're like, wow, whatever, and never once, 0 tested negative. Like, she had to have tests to get back to work. She was negative because I stood on that promise. And those are the things as moms we have to do for our kids. We may not see it right now, but if we do not give up, it will manifest, because God's plan for our children is that they are thriving. He's got a plan and a destiny for every single child, every single one. And they have gifts and talents. And we as parents, it's our responsibility to develop those, right? And
Yes.
it's our responsibility, I think the moms, because we have that intuition and we have to fight for our children, and we have to come up against what's being said. And we have to have tender hearts for moms that aren't there yet, and pray for strategies of how to reach them. Like,
yes,
what
and
is
that's
it
another
we
thing
need
that I
to
would
do?
like you to just touch on, because this is an area that is new for me. It's something that I've come to understand and be very humble about, that I have been guided and that it's divine guidance, and that I need to be humble about the miracles that's been given to me through my son's turnaround journey. There were times when he was in the darkest phases where it looked like darkness had taken him. And when I look at the attacks that sometimes come towards me because I'm public and because there's a lot of trolling online sometimes. When I look at that attack, it comes from a very dark place. So what are some of the best tools that you have in order to protect and to go towards what is the plan, which is healing, light, balance, family units? Because these symptoms break up families and they break us apart.
Yes.
So instead of falling for you should be ashamed of wanting to create health, peace, and harmony, what are some of the tools that you can bring to parents that are really feeling hopeless right now?
Well, I would say the number one thing for me, and what I think is the revelation, is everything spiritual. Everything spiritual. And there's only 2 spiritual forces. There's the light and there's the dark. And so, like you saw with your child and I did with mine, I'm like, that is not my child. Whatever is manifesting right now is not her. And something has been given, entry to, like, manifest per se. And that was darkness. That was evil. That was stuff from my generational line. When you start to learn about things coming through the generations, right? I learned that I had Masonry and Illuminati things in my generations, which can manifest in those things. So I broke those off, and that was part of her healing, so we have to address those spiritual things as well. And these kids, this is my personal theory of autism, which we'll see how people receive this. But I feel kids who have been diagnosed with autism have a special connection with God, with the spirit realm. They see things we don't see. They hear things we don't hear. It can be intense. My daughter dreams, it happens. So why was she afraid to go to sleep? Because she would have intense dreams, sometimes from God, sometimes from the enemy. And so she was scared to death, because if she dreamed it, it happened. The spiritual connection is so strong. And I feel like sometimes it's an inward turn, because I can't handle what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I'm like, I don't know how to, and we didn't know how to steward her spiritual giftings, because she's got all of them.
Yeah.
And so when we were going to our church, they thought I was crazy when I started talking about some of these things. But when we went to a church that realized about spiritual giftings and taught us how to teach her to walk in her authority against the dark side of the world, like, in Jesus' name, go. So she would literally see demons. And because our pastor said, well, pay attention to where she has meltdowns. Because I'm like, we go to the mall. She has meltdown every time we go to the mall. I can't go to the mall. He's like, well, go to the mall and see where, okay, outside of Hot Tropic, whatever it is. It's a very demonic store. And like, it just has lots of nasty stuff. She would fall to the floor and start screaming.
Well, that's something I need to touch on, because I feel that's what most of these kids do when they get into malls. Yes. So let's say these children know what is the darkness, what is wrong with this planet, what's wrong with our choices, what's wrong with the food, what's wrong with what we do to each other. And they react on amplifier. So they just turn up the volume. So what if the spinning, the tantrums, the screaming, the night terrors, the meltdowns are all responses to warn us against dark foods, dark experts, dark places, things we got to stop doing.
Right.
That's
100%. Yes. Yes. And when they're young, they don't know how to deal with that. You know what I mean? They have no idea when they're 4 years old or 3 years old and seeing some of this stuff, what to do, you know, and we can teach them how to handle some of those things. But also it's like, they have such, like, I feel like God, like you said, they're such a gift to not only us, but to the world, because they also see things so differently and have solutions. Like the solutions my daughter has blows my mind. And like the company she's working for sees this. And like then the integrity, she was doing a ad thing, and like there was a flag on it and they wanted to change some colors. She's like, absolutely not, because the colors of that flag are this, and we have to preserve the integrity of that. Like we can't change the colors because it's going to fit our logo, you know? So like, I feel like there's just this deep rootedness they have. And the enemy doesn't want them to walk in that, because that is what God's designed them to do. So I feel like there's a heavier attack against them, against the families that are stewarding these children, because their call is so great to combat what's going on in our world.
Yes.
And so we need to rise up as moms, as families, coming around these children and finding the roots, because their bodies, like really, like I remember one time you said like, you're gonna eat it and just feel shitty, you know, like, yep. But I feel like that's how their bodies are. They intake something through their eyes or their ears, or they eat something. Like their response is so amplified, because it's almost like they are born with this instinctive purity that can't be violated. And when it is, there's this intense reaction, you know. And as they get older, and like that feeling of feeling us, you know, like I always knew that with my daughter, but I never had words because I didn't know you then, you know, but I knew there was this connection. Like if I was stressed, she was stressed. If, you know, and I'm like, I got to keep myself calm. I got to keep myself calm. But I didn't have the tools of like how to calm myself down when she's going after my other children, or having my daughter go get knitting needles so she can stab herself, you know, and like, you know, so those tools like we develop. So I think like when it boils down to like actual tools to help our kids is one, I feel like nature, like you have taught me, is something I did not have in my journey. However, we were outside all the time and we lived at the beach all summer. So I kind of was pondering the other day, was our summers were always so much better. And I just figured it was because we didn't have school. But it was because, I mean, and you know, all of you probably have similar things. Your children hate socks anyway, or shoes, or clothes for that matter.
Yes.
So they, you know, were out and in the woods and in the water and in the sand, and our summers were just so much better, you know? And I think truly it was because we were outdoors. And in the winter, even when we're outdoors, we're so bundled because it's cold. So we're not really getting a lot of exposure. But so I think nature is huge. Getting your kids outside is like number one. I think it is really number one. And then I think moms, like the biggest message to me through all of this has been, I completely left myself. I did heal my daughter. I did heal another one of my sons, but you know, and like with God and myself and whatever, but I never took care of me. And so, you know, entering this journey with my son, there's been this huge awakening of I have to take care of me. Like I need to do, and it's not me time as I need to go veg out and watch movies and eat popcorn and ice cream in front of the TV and have me time and have my glass of wine. And that's the American me time for moms. It's actually, okay, my body does not thrive on sugar. Why am I eating the sugar? And this is what your course helped me with. Why am I eating that? I don't even like it. And it makes me feel like crap, you know? And then it's, you know, oh, like I walk my dogs every day. And then like I've walked my dogs for 2 years, 3 years. And the other day I just felt like I've got to run. I've just got to run.
Yeah,
So I just like started running. And I used to be a runner. I used to run 20, 30 miles a week. And I just started running. I ran 1.5 miles after not running for like 15 years.
Beautiful.
Like that's not normal. But like really listening to what my body is needing, or needing sleep, or like you said, going to the bathroom, feeding myself, having food in my fridge. Like I always feed my kids healthy. But then I'd skip meals, and it was that self-sabotage stuff. And so really dealing with that as a mom is so key. And it's interesting because I didn't know you, and those tools never were developed with my first two, the journey with my first two. But with my third here, like without this within me, he would not be being healed right now. Because I see, as in, you're gonna find this funny. So all of you know my son's struggling with hair loss. And all of a sudden, look at my hair. I've got all this hair growing in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like maybe this is what's going to bring healing to him. Like literally there's that connection. And I feel like there's something between mothers and sons that's a little different than mothers and daughters. And so I just know that as I am healing, he is healing. As I am being true to like what I know I need for myself and I'm following through with, and also just letting flow happen in my life, because I've never been able to do that. Like yesterday, I had a plan of what my afternoon was going to look like. And then a situation came up and I'm like, okay, I have to let go of my plan and I need to be over in here. I need to be in peace and I need to deal with this plan. And then that kind of subsided, the crisis. So then I went back and I'm like, okay, now I can finish what I was doing. And I finished that. And then my little guy was like, hey, we should have tea and watch a movie and stuff. And like before, even though I had to stop doing what I was doing, I would have been pissed that I had to stop doing what I was doing and I have to deal with this crisis and so sick of this. Like that would have been my thinking, but it wasn't. It was like, okay, I'm going to stop this and fully engage in this crisis.
Yeah.
And go through it and feel it and stay in peace and pray. That's done. Wow, look at, now I have time to still finish what I needed to do. Like the time was still there. So that is so key, because I couldn't do that before. And then that rigidness, I feel like that whole situation would have exploded yesterday had I been in that rigidness and not been able to just let go. So I think that's number 2 for sure. And like food, nutrition, sleep, circadian rhythm, all of that is super key. Like even with all of our family, we've gotten back more on our circadian clock. With COVID, we just got in this like literally mom survival mode. I was like, they stay up till 11, they sleep till 9, and I have from like 5 to 9 to do my stuff, which is not healthy, for any of us, because so I started getting everybody up. We eat by 9 a.m. and we're following that clock. We're sitting down for lunch between 11 and 1. And when we're doing that, there's just this flow in our life that has come in peace, and everybody's just doing so much better, so I think that also is such a key. And just our food and the toxic burden. I'm a big toxic. One of my things, I'm licensed, or not licensed, there's no license here. What would it be? Certified as a detox coach or detox wellness practitioner. I don't know, but like detoxing, but doing it in a way where our body naturally does it. Like not pushing out, not doing a juice fast and those things. It's simply changing what we did, because I feel like sleep detoxes us, what we eat detoxes us, drinking adequate amount of water. We don't need to take supplements and stuff to detox our body. Not that there's not a time and a place for that, right? But literally just by shifting those things can make such a huge difference. I mean, that's how my daughter was healed, was basically food. And then the spiritual piece also has to be addressed. Like there needs to be an awakening to, there is a spiritual piece, there is a source, and that source is God, and he does have divine wisdom, and he will give us the entire plan. He will tell us step by step. Like even yesterday with that situation, I'm like, okay, this is so out of my realm. It's not even my kid. I don't even know how to deal with it. And I just prayed for peace and resolution, and that her family would be restored, and like that I would just have words to speak to de-escalate. And it's literally what happened, So I think it's not underestimating the power of the spirit over all of it. And our authority to command the crap, it has no authority in my home. Like the enemy can't be in here, nightmares can't be in here, night terrors can't be in here, you know. And I remember when I was learning this stuff as my daughter, like literally I would take oil and anoint her room every day. I would anoint her room, and I would just declare the truth. You know, that, I don't know, there's some verse about that, when sleep comes, it will be peaceful, you know, and I declare that over her, and I would command whatever to go, you know, and just taking that authority, you know, and knowing the spiritual world is real. And when we speak, angels are activated, and angels actually can't even work if we don't like come into agreement with them. They're here to help us, but they need permission to do what they're supposed to do, you know. So we need to, like, okay, I dispatch my child's angels over them, you know, to clear the path, to make the way, you know, whatever. So I feel like those are kind of the key pieces and tools that we can have as parents, you know.
That's a really, really good way to end this conversation. The way that we understand through these children where we have left our own journey, because that's often a missing link. If you're a Christian and you're praying and you're doing all this, the diets, and you're following great medical practitioners or whatever you choose to do, and nothing happens, there's almost always a self-sabotage pattern, because the brain does not like change, and there's a pain underneath the pain that we need to revisit. So where did we leave ourselves, our soul, our pain, our values, sanity, nature, healing, and truth? So that's really something that you summed up with all the different steps that you took in order to turn your child around. And now you are helping other moms, supporting other moms who are going down that same pathway. So where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to follow you or learn more from you?
Yes, I would say the best place is my website. So it's Healthy Living with Kelli, and Kelli is spelled Kelli. .com. So it's healthylivingwithkelli.com. Just because that is like, I'm starting to post videos and stuff there. Social media is not really my jive. I'm trying, but so that is where really I have my blog on there. I have food, because I feel like food is overwhelming. Food is so overwhelming when we start to like go gluten-free, dairy-free, whatever it is. And so I have recipes that my kids love and stuff like that, which I think individually you kind of have to watch with your kids, because you could eat it and it's gluten-free and it's fine. You know, there's so many of those things. But a lot of my teaching stuff I'm starting to post in a video section, of just like, I try to break things down so that overwhelmed moms can take one step, you know, and and go from there. And so all of my content basically is going to be driven there. And then from there, we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing and for the support that you are to so many moms. And we will link to your website in the description, and maybe also where you get your oils, if people want to do the anointment. Because there's so many other things you can do with that. So we're going to give people your favorite links. And then I just recommend everyone start following that page.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you so much for being in my life and teaching me so many things about the spiritual path as well.
Well, I just thank you for everything you're doing. And what a divine connection, how we were parallel lives on two different continents, basically being led exactly the same way with different terminology, right? So it's so miraculous. And to see that synergy of coming together to amplify the voice of, like, literally the plan of God. His plan is for every child to for every child to walk in their potential and what he created them for. So it's such an honor and joy to link arms with you and just get this to be the norm. We're going to take over the norm. I'm going to declare it right now. The norm will be that turning around autism is normal. It's what you should do.
Exactly. We declare that, and thank you so much for that hope that you're bringing, Kelli. And I really look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.